Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the guardian of Japan. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. You can become a hero. Those words, spoken on a rooftop bathed in the golden hues of a setting sun, felt like they belonged to a different lifetime. They were a relic of an era when the sun actually shone, before the sky was choked by the smoke of burning cities and the dust of crumbled institutions. Izuku Midoriya stood on the precipice of a nondescript building on the outskirts of the Kamino ward. The rain didn't fall, it hammered. It drove against the concrete like shrapnel, soaking through the tattered remains of his gamma suit, plastering his green curls against his forehead. In his hand, he held a small, high-tech communication device. The screen blinked with a single name, All Might. The device vibrated. Once. Twice. A desperate rhythm. Izuku stared at the name, his green eyes dull, lacking the vibrant shine they had possessed only a year ago. Underneath the grime and the rain, the skin around his eyes was bruised purple from lack of sleep. I'm sorry, Izuku whispered. The sound was swallowed instantly by the thunder rolling overhead. He didn't answer the call. Instead, he tightened his grip. One for all surged at 5%. Just a flicker, and the metal casing crunched. Glass shattered. The circuitry sparked and died. He opened his hand, letting the debris fall into the flooded alleyway below. The tether was cut. He was no longer a student. He was no longer a sidekick. He was the target. And a target had no business standing next to the fragile, retired symbol of peace. Izuku pulled his yellow cape, Gran Torino's cape, tighter around his shoulders. It smelled of ozone and dried blood. Danger sense stabbed at the base of his skull. A sharp, cold needle of pain. Fourth user, movement. 3 blocks east. Malice level, low. Desperation level, high. Izuku didn't waste a second. He bent his knees, green lightning crackling around his body, and vanished into the storm. Part 1. The Ghost of Society. Japan had not simply fallen, it had dissolved. The caves following the Paranormal Liberation War and the subsequent prison breaks had turned the orderly grid of society into a feral wasteland. The police were overwhelmed, huddled in fortified precincts. Pro-heroes were retiring in droves, unable to handle the criticism or the sheer, overwhelming tide of villainy. The streets of the residential district Izuku landed in were dark. The power grid had failed 3 days ago. Storefronts were smashed, their insides gutted. Izuku landed silently on a lamppost, perched like a gargoyle. Below him, a group of 5 men were trying to pry open the shutters of a pharmacy. They weren't villains in the traditional sense. They didn't wear costumes. They were civilians, fathers, brothers, neighbors, armed with crowbars and bats, driven to madness by fear and scarcity. Hurry up! One hissed, glancing nervously at the shadows. Before the escapists come. I need the insulin, damn it! Another shouted, slamming his crowbar against the lock. Izuku watched from above. His heart didn't race. His hands didn't shake. A year ago, he would have jumped down, hands raised, trying to de-escalate with a smile and a stutter. He would have offered to help. He would have sympathized. But sympathy took time. And time was a luxury he no longer possessed. Danger sense flared again. Not from the looters. From behind them. A shadow detached itself from the alleyway. A villain, a escapee from a local detention center, his skin made of jagged rock. He lunged toward the unsuspecting looters, a jagged blade of stone forming in his hand. Die, trash! The villain shrieked. Black whip? Before the villain could close the distance, black tendrils erupted from the darkness above. They moved with the speed of bullets, wrapping around the villain's torso and throat. There was no smash. No yell. Izuku yanked his arm back. The villain was ripped off the ground, flying upward into the rainy sky. Izuku met him in midair. He spun, driving a steel-soled heel into the villain's temple with surgical precision. The impact was a dull thud, barely audible over the rain. The villain's eyes rolled back, and he went limp instantly. Izuku landed softly on the pavement, the unconscious body of the villain draped over his shoulder. He dropped the man effortlessly, securing him to the lamppost with a loop of black whip that hardened into a binding. The looters froze. They stared at the figure standing in the rain. Izuku looked terrifying. His suit was ripped, exposing the scars on his arms. The iron soles of his boots were chipped, but it was the mask, the metal respirator that covered his mouth, and the glowing, toxic green of his eyes that froze the blood in their veins. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a revenant. "Take what you need," Izuku said. His voice was raspy, distorted by the mask. "Then go home. Lock your doors. Do not come out, ARU." One of the looters stammered, dropping his crowbar. "Are you a hero?" Izuku turned away, looking toward the horizon where smoke was rising. "No," he replied. He triggered float, rising into the air, followed by a burst of FA that launched him across the rooftops, leaving a sonic boom in his wake that shattered the remaining glass of the pharmacy windows. Part 2, The Burden of One. Hours bled into one another. Izuku moved in a blur of motion. Rest was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Shigaraki's face. He saw the decay spreading. He felt the cold, suffocating grip of all for one trying to pry one for all from his soul. He had to keep moving. If he stopped, they would find him. If they found him, people would die. He found himself atop a water tower in a quiet sector of the city, forcing himself to eat a nutrient jelly pouch he had scavenged from his own supplies. It tasted like chalk. "First user, you need to sleep." Ninth. The voice echoed in his head, gentle but firm. "Nana Shimura, look at your hands, Izuku. You're shaking." Izuku looked down. His gloved hand was indeed trembling. Not from fear, but from the sheer metabolic cost of running one for all continuously. "I can't," Izuku muttered to the empty air. "If I sleep, the danger sense turns off. I'll miss something." Second user, you'll miss everything if you're dead from exhaustion. You're being efficient, but you're running on fumes. The boy is right to worry, but the soldier needs maintenance. "I'm not a soldier," Izuku snapped, crushing the empty jelly pouch. "I'm the only thing standing between them and total annihilation." He stood up, his knees cracking. Danger sense spiked. It wasn't the dull throb of a petty crime. It was a searing, white-hot migraine that nearly brought him to his knees. It was a specific signature. A bloodlust so pure it felt like a physical weight. He was here. Izuku didn't need the GPS. He followed the pain. Part 3, Rematch in the Ruins. He found him in the remains of a shopping district. Muscular, Goto Masuji, stood amidst the rubble of a collapsed arcade. He was bigger than before, his muscle fibers swelling grotesquely, uncontrolled and erratic. He was tossing cars aside like toys, roaring into the night, demanding a challenge. "Come out!" Muscular bellowed, his voice shaking the foundations of the nearby buildings. "I know you're out there. I can smell the fear. I can smell the self-righteousness." Muscular grabbed a chunk of concrete and hurled it at a nearby apartment complex where civilians were cowering in the dark. The concrete never hit. A blur of green intercepted the projectile. Izuku caught the multi-ton slab of rock with one hand, the force of the impact sliding him backward a few feet, carving grooves into the asphalt. Muscular grinned, a predatory, manic expression. "There you are. Midoriya." He recognized the boy instantly, despite the grime and the change in demeanor. "I've been waiting." Muscular roared, his fibers expanding, enveloping his body in a suit of raw, pink flesh. "I want a rematch. I want to hear you scream again. I want to see you break." Izuku gently set the concrete slab down. He didn't take a fighting stance. He just stood there, arms hanging loosely at his sides. "I don't have time for this," Izuku said. Muscular blinked then laughed. "Time? Who cares about time? Let's have some fun." Muscular launched himself forward. He was faster than he was at the summer camp. The shockwave of his takeoff shattered the pavement. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, winding up a punch that could level a skyscraper. "Show me your blood." Izuku watched the fist coming. In his mind, time slowed to a crawl. Third user, FA gene is charged. Release. Sixth user, smokescreen. Maximum density. Purple smoke exploded from Izuku's body, instantly filling the entire street, blinding Muscular. "Cheap tricks." Muscular yelled, swinging blindly into the smoke. His fist connected with nothing but air. Danger sense guided Izuku through the fog. He was a ghost in the machine. Izuku appeared behind Muscular. He didn't use 100%. He didn't need to. He focused the power of one for all into the tips of his fingers, reinforced by Black Whip. He struck Muscular's left shoulder, specifically the connection point of the muscle fibers. A precise, surgical strike. Muscular howled as his left arm went limp, the fibers snapping back. What did you do? Izuku didn't answer. He ducked under a wild haymaker from Muscular's right arm. He moved like water. Gear shift, low gear to top gear. Instantaneous acceleration. Izuku drove his fist into Muscular's solar plexus. The impact was silent for a split second, followed by a concussive blast that cleared the smoke from the street. Muscular's eyes bulged. He gagged, lifting off his feet. Izuku didn't let him fly away. Black Whip shot out, wrapping around Muscular's ankles, slamming him back down into the cratered earth. Wait, Muscular wheezed, blood dripping from his mouth. Let's talk about this. The joy of the fight was gone. Muscular looked up, and for the first time, he felt what his victims felt. He looked into Izuku's eyes and saw absolutely zero hesitation. No, you can change. No, why are you doing this? Just a job to be done. You enjoy violence, Izuku said quietly, standing over the massive villain? You think power gives you the right to take what you want. Izuku raised his leg, charging it with 45%. You're wrong. He brought his heel down. The fight lasted less than 60 seconds. When the dust settled, Muscular was unconscious, buried waist deep in the asphalt. His muscle fibers had retracted. He looked small. Izuku stood over him, his chest heaving slightly. He felt nothing. No triumph. No relief. Just the cold calculation that a threat had been neutralized. Sirens wailed in the distance, the first sign of police in hours. They would find the villain gift-wrapped. Izuku turned to leave, but a voice stopped him. Midoriya? He froze. Emerging from the ruins of the apartment complex was a young woman. She was holding a child. Izuku recognized her vaguely. Someone from the neighborhood. Is it over? She asked, trembling. Izuku looked at her. He wanted to smile. He wanted to say, it's fine now. Why? Because I am here. But the words died in his throat. He felt the weight of All Might's legacy, a mantle that was too heavy, too bright for the world he now lived in. If he smiled, he would be lying. It wasn't fine. It wouldn't be fine for a long time. He won't hurt you anymore, Izuku said. Thank you, she wept. Thank you, hero. Izuku flinched at the word. Stay inside, he commanded again, his voice cracking. He launched himself into the air, fleeing the gratitude. He couldn't accept it. He hadn't saved the world. He had just delayed the inevitable. Part 4, The Broken Crown. The rain intensified as the night dragged on. Izuku found himself drifting toward the center of Tokyo. The city that never slept was now in a coma. The neon lights were dead. The skyscrapers were tombstones. He landed on the spire of the Tokyo Tower. The wind whipped at him, threatening to knock him off, but he stuck to the steel with the soles of his boots. From this vantage point, he could see the fires burning in 3 different districts. He could hear the distant screams carried by the wind. He sat down on the edge, his legs dangling over the abyss. He pulled a small, crumbled photo from a waterproof pouch in his belt. It was a picture of Class 1A. They were smiling. Uraraka was making a peace sign. Ida was chopping the air. Bakugo was scowling, but he was there. Izuku ran his thumb over their faces. If I go back, he thought, I bring the war to them. Shigaraki can find me. AFO can find me. If I stand next to them, they die. The logic was sound. It was irrefutable. But it felt like a knife twisting in his gut. Nana Shimura, you are punishing yourself, Izuku. This isn't just about protection. You think you don't deserve to be with them. I failed, Izuku whispered. I let Shigaraki wake up. I let the cities fall. I wasn't strong enough. First user, you are a child fighting a god. I'm not a child anymore. He put the photo away. His phone, the burner phone he used to monitor emergency frequencies, buzzed. It was a text message. Unknown number. I know you're listening. Come back to UA. We can fight this together. Shoto. Izuku stared at the screen. Shoto. His friend. He typed a reply, "I can't." He hovered his thumb over the send button. Then, he deleted it. He turned the phone off and crushed it, just like he had crushed the communicator with all might. No contact. No trace. He stood up on the spire. The wind howled around him, tearing at his cape. "The symbol of peace is gone," Izuku spoke to the storm. All Might built a world on smiles and hope. But that world was fragile. It broke the moment people got scared. He clenched his fists, the green lightning of One for All surging around him, brighter and more violent than before. It arced off his body, illuminating the rust-red steel of the tower. "They don't need a symbol of peace right now," Izuku declared, his eyes glowing with a ferocious intensity. "They need a deterrent. They need to know that there is something in the dark that is scarier than the villains." He looked out over the ruined expanse of Japan. "I will be the vigilance. I will be the sleepless eye. I will be the guardian." Danger sense flared. A massive jailbreak attempt in the Naruma ward. 20 miles away. "Let's go," he muttered. He didn't jump. He exploded from the tower. He moved with such velocity that the air cracked. He was a green streak across the black sky, a comet of pure power hurtling toward the chaos. Izuku Midoriya had left the boy behind on that rainy rooftop. What remained was something else entirely. Something harder. Something colder. And he would not stop until the last villain fell, or until his own heart stopped beating. Fear is the only law that remains. The rain had not stopped. Not really. For 2 months, a low-pressure system had stalled over the Japanese archipelago, as if the heavens themselves were weeping for the nation below. The perpetual gloom turned day into a gray twilight and night into an abyssal void. In the chaotic districts of Yokohama, now referred to by the remnants of the government as Dark Zone 4, the silence was the most terrifying thing. Noise meant life. Screams meant struggle. But silence? Silence meant the predators were hunting. A makeshift convoy of 3 armored trucks sat idling in the center of a flooded intersection. They were painted with the logo of a private security firm, but the men inside were not security guards. They were opportunists. Scavengers. They wore mismatched riot gear stolen from a raid on a police precinct 3 weeks ago. Engines flooded, the driver of the lead truck spat, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. "Piece of junk. Keep your voice down," the man in the passenger seat hissed, clutching a modified nail gun. He peered out into the rain-slicked darkness. The streetlights had been dead for weeks. The only illumination came from the truck's headlights, cutting yellow cones through the downpour. "Why? There's no heroes out here," the driver scoffed, though his eyes darted nervously to the shadows. "Endeavor and the rest of the top 3 are busy guarding the ritzy shelters in Tokyo. Out here, we're the kings." "I'm not worried about heroes," the passenger whispered. "I'm worried about the ghost." The driver froze. A heavy silence settled in the cab, broken only by the rhythmic thrum-thrum-thrum of the wipers. "That's a myth," the driver said, his voice lacking conviction. "Just a story people tell to scare the escapees. A green ghost that moves faster than sound? A demon covered in mud? It's probably just some vigilante with a speed quirk. We can handle a vigilante. They say he doesn't talk," the passenger continued, ignoring him. "They say he doesn't arrest you. They say he just breaks you. Remember the Tartarus escapees in Shizuoka? Found tie-wrapped to a cell tower. All of them had broken ribs. All of them unconscious. No witnesses." "Shut up," the driver snapped. He reached for his radio. "Convoy 2, get out and help me push. We need to get these supplies to the broker before." Thump. It was a soft sound. Like a heavy wet sack hitting the roof of the truck. The driver stopped breathing. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Something landed on the roof. The passenger slowly raised his nail gun toward the roof of the cab. "Maybe it's debris." "The wind is." The metal roof of the armored truck shrieked as it was torn open like a sardine can. Rain poured into the cabin. The driver looked up, screaming, but the scream was cut short. 2 glowing green eyes stared down from the hole. They weren't human. They were luminescent, toxic, burning with a cold, hard pressure that felt like the bottom of the ocean. "Leave the supplies," a voice rasped. It sounded mechanical, filtered through a respirator, but beneath the distortion, it was hollow. "Walk away," the passenger panicked. He fired the nail gun upward. Thwip thwip thwip. The nails sparked against the torn metal, hitting nothing. The hole was empty. Where did he go? The passenger shrieked. Outside, the sounds of violence erupted. It wasn't a fight. It was a dismantling. They heard the crunch of metal, the shattering of glass, and the wet thud of bodies hitting the pavement. The driver kicked his door open, scrambling out into the mud. He looked back at the convo. The second truck was on its side. It weighed 4 tons, yet it had been flipped like a toy car. The third truck was suspended in the air, held aloft by tendrils of black energy that writhed like living shadows. And there, standing in the center of the devastation, was the entity. He was small, barely taller than a teenager, but his presence filled the entire street. He was covered in a layer of grime so thick his suit looked black. A tattered yellow cape hung heavy and sodden from his shoulders. Sparks of green lightning danced violently around him, illuminating the rain droplets in suspended animation. Monster! The driver whimpered, backing away. The figure turned his head. The green eyes locked onto the driver. Danger sense didn't trigger. The man was too terrified to be a threat. Walk away, the figure repeated. The driver didn't need to be told a third time. He turned and ran, splashing through the flooded streets, leaving the stolen medical supplies behind. He didn't look back. He ran until his lungs burned, fueled by the primal knowledge that he had just looked death in the face and been granted a reprieve. In the silence that followed, Izuku Midoriya stood alone. He didn't check the supplies. He knew there were refugees in a subway station 3 blocks north who needed them. He would send an anonymous ping to the few remaining honest police frequencies. He flexed his hand. The gauntlet on his right arm was sparking. He had pushed one for all to 45% to flip the truck. His bones ached, a deep, marrow-level throb that never went away anymore. 4th user, northwest. 3 kilometers. High-speed pursuit. Malice level medium, Izuku sighed. The sound was lost in the wind. He crouched, the concrete cracking beneath his iron soles. No rest, he whispered. Green lightning exploded, and the ghost vanished into the night. Part 2, The Machine. Time was no longer measured in hours or minutes. It was measured in distance traveled and threats neutralized. Izuku Midoriya had become a machine of perpetual motion. He sat, if it could be called sitting, perched on the arm of a gargoyle atop an abandoned Gothic cathedral in the Minato ward. He had been there for exactly 90 seconds. In his hand was a protein bar, its wrapper torn open with his teeth. He chewed mechanically, not tasting the stale chocolate. It was fuel. Nothing more. His body was changing. The softness of his youth had been stripped away, replaced by lean, corded muscle that looked like steel wire under his scarred skin. He had lost weight. His cheeks were gaunt under the mask, his eyes sunken. He hadn't slept in, how long? 3rd user, 52 hours since your last REM cycle. 9th. You microslept for 4 minutes while riding the bullet train tracks yesterday. Enough, Izuku muttered, swallowing the last of the bar. 1st user, it isn't enough, Izuku. Your reaction times are degrading by 0.05% every 6 hours. You are making mistakes. I haven't let anyone die, Izuku countered internally. 1st user, you broke that villain's arm earlier. It wasn't necessary. You could have restrained him. He was reaching for a detonator. I couldn't take the risk. Izuku stood up, wiping the rain from his visor. His suit, once a symbol of hope, was now a patchwork of repairs. He had used blackwork to stitch tears in the fabric. He had welded cracks in his iron soles using the friction heat of his own movement. He looked like a scavenger. He looked like a villain. He knew what the people were calling him. The Green Ghost. The Revenant. The Ronin. He didn't care about names. Names were for heroes who gave interviews. Names were for people who wanted to sell merchandise. He just wanted to be the wall that the wave of malice crashed against. He closed his eyes for a second, letting the danger sense wash over him. It was a constant low-level hum, a headache that never went away. The entire country was in pain. Buzz, a sharp spike. 4th user south. Harbor District. Something big. It's not human. Izuku's eyes snapped open. Not human. Noma. He didn't hesitate. He simply leaned forward and let gravity take him. As he fell, he engaged Black Whip, swinging from the cathedral spire, using the momentum to slingshot himself southward. The wind roared in his ears, but inside the vestige world, the debate was raging. Part 3. The Parliament of Ghosts. The vestige world was usually a place of abstract thoughts and hazy visuals, but lately it had become sharp and volatile, reflecting Izuku's fraying mental state. Izuku's consciousness floated in the void while his body moved on autopilot, traversing the city rooftops at subsonic speeds. Nana Shimura stood before him. Her expression was one of profound grief. "You need to go to UA, Izuku," Nana said, her voice trembling. "Or find Endeavor. Find someone. You are isolating yourself to death. Humans are social creatures. Even one for all cannot sustain a spirit that is completely alone." "I'm not alone," Izuku's avatar replied. He looked like his younger self here, but his eyes were hard. "I have you guys. We are ghosts," Nana cried, gesturing to the other users standing in the semicircle. "We are memories. You need warmth, Izuku. You need a hand to hold. You need to hear your friends tell you that you're okay. If I go to them, they get hurt," Izuku repeated the mantra. "AFO can track me. I am the bait. If the bait goes into the safe house burns." "He has a point," the second user, Kudo, interjected. He stood with his arms crossed, his face stern. He was a man of war, from the chaotic dawn of quirks. The boy is fighting a war of attrition. Sentimentalism is what allowed Shigaraki to survive the first time. We hesitated. We tried to save him. Look where that got us. We are heroes, Nana argued, turning on Kudo. Not soldiers. If he loses his heart, he becomes no different than All for One, just a force of power imposing his will. Better a ruthless guardian than a dead hero, the second retorted. He turned to Izuku. Ninth, ignore the fatigue. Use FA gene to bypass the muscular exhaustion. You can store kinetic energy from your travel and release it to compensate for your slower reflexes. I know, Izuku said. I'm already doing it. Izuku, please, Nana pleaded, reaching out a ghostly hand. Look at yourself. You aren't saving the world. You're just punishing yourself for surviving. Izuku looked away from her. The accusation stung because it was true. He felt guilty. Guilty that Gran Torino was maimed. Guilty that Aizawa lost an eye and a leg. Guilty that Kaken took a stab wound meant for him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the destruction. I have to go, Izuku said, severing the connection to the inner world. We're here. Part 4. The Siege of Jaku. The target was the Jaku General Hospital Annex. It was one of the few medical facilities still operating in the chaotic zone between Tokyo and Yokohama. It was a fortress, barricaded with concrete walls and guarded by a handful of retired heroes who were too old or injured to fight on the front lines but refused to give up. But tonight, the barricades were useless. Izuku landed on a rooftop overlooking the hospital complex. The scene was a nightmare. Fires burned in the parking lot. Cars were overturned. But the real threat was standing at the main entrance. It was a Nomu, but not a mindless, screeching beast. This was a high-end. Or at least, a near high-end. It stood 10 feet tall, its body a grotesque amalgamation of pale muscle and exposed bone. It had 4 arms, each ending in a different weaponized appendage, a bone saw, a massive hammer fist, and claws. Its brain was exposed, glowing with a sickly pulsance. Doctor. The Nomu gurgled. Its voice was wet and deep. Where is Doctor? It swung its hammer fist, smashing through the reinforced glass doors of the lobby. Inside, screams erupted. The retired heroes, an old man with a shield quirk and a woman who could shoot solid air, were trying to hold the line in the lobby. Fall back! The shield hero shouted, his barrier cracking under the Nomu's assault. Get the patients to the basement. It's too strong! The woman yelled, firing air bullets that bounced harmlessly off the Nomu's shock absorption skin. The Nomu swatted the shield hero aside like a fly. The old man hit the wall with a sickening crunch and slumped to the floor. Weak! The Nomu hissed. It stepped into the lobby, its eyes scanning. Hungry, it reached out with a clawed hand toward a nurse who was trying to drag a patient's gurney away. The nurse froze, paralyzed by terror. The claw descended. Crack! The ceiling of the lobby exploded downward. Debris rained down, choking the air with dust. The Noma flinched, stepping back. In the center of the crater, crouching amidst the broken tiles and drywall, was the green ghost. He didn't make a speech. He didn't say, "I am here." He uncoiled. One for all, 45%. Black whip, bracing style. Izuku launched himself forward, moving faster than the eye could track. He slammed into the Noma's chest, driving it backward out of the lobby and back into the rain-soaked parking lot. The impact was like a cannon blast. The Noma skidded 50 feet, its claws tearing gouges in the asphalt. Izuku landed opposite it, his breath hissing through his respirator. "Target identified," Izuku muttered. "Regenerative capabilities likely. Strength high. Speed moderate." The Noma shook its head, looking at the small green figure. "You!" The Noma growled. A spark of recognition flickered in its artificial brain. "Master wants you. Come and get me," Izuku said. The Noma roared, a sound that shattered windows 3 blocks away, and charged. Part 5: Brutality. The fight that followed was not a hero's battle. It was a demolition. The Noma was fast, its 4 arms creating a whirlwind of death. The bone saw spun, cutting through lampposts and cars. The hammer fist smashed craters into the ground. But Izuku was everywhere and nowhere. He used smokescreen, flooding the parking lot with thick purple fog. To the Noma, he was invisible. To Izuku, guided by danger sense, the Noma was a bright beacon of malice. Izuku attacked from the smoke. One for all, Manchester smash. He dropped from the sky, slamming his heel into the Noma's shoulder. The bone cracked. The Noma screeched and lashed out blindly. Izuku was already gone, swinging away on a black whip tendril. "Fourth user, watch out. It has a sensory quirk." The Noma's eyes glowed red. "Found you!" It spun, firing a beam of compressed energy from its mouth. The beam cut through the smoke, catching Izuku in midair. It grazed his side. The heat seared through his gamma suit, burning his skin. Izuku gritted his teeth, suppressing the scream. He didn't stop. He couldn't stop. He landed on the hood of an overturned ambulance. The Noma charged him, all 4 arms swinging, overwhelmed him. The second user shouted in his head. "Don't give him time to heal. Speed, 9th. More speed!" Izuku narrowed his eyes. The green lightning around him turned white-hot. "FA gene, release. 100% pseudostate." Izuku moved. He didn't just dodge the attacks, he wove through them. He ducked under the bone saw, slid past the hammer fist, and leaped over the claws. He was inside the Noma's guard. St. Louis smash! He kicked the Noma's chin, launching the massive beast into the air. Izuku followed it up. He was a blur of violence. Black whip, Froppy style. He shot a tendril out, grabbing the Noma's leg, and yanked it back down. As the Noma fell, Izuku spun, charging his right arm. He didn't aim for the face. He aimed for the limbs. Delaware smash, Air Force. A blast of compressed air severed the Noma's right arm at the elbow. The beast howled. Izuku landed on its chest as it hit the ground. He didn't let up. He couldn't risk it getting back up and hurting the people inside. He grabbed the Noma's remaining left arm, the one with the bone saw, and pulled. With a wet tear, the enhanced muscle fibers gave way. Izuku ripped the arm off. It was brutal. It was primal. The civilians watching from the shattered windows of the hospital gasped. They weren't cheering. They were horrified. This wasn't All Might defeating a villain with a smile. This was a soldier dismantling an enemy. The Noma lay on the ground, regenerating slowly, but not fast enough. It looked up at Izuku with hate-filled eyes. "Master, will kill." Izuku stood over it. He placed his iron boot on the Noma's chest, pinning it down. He raised his hand, charging a final blast to destroy the exposed brain. "Your master is hiding," Izuku said coldly. "And I'm coming for him." He prepared to fire. "Wait!" A voice called out from the hospital entrance. It was the nurse the Noma had almost killed. She had run out into the rain, holding a smartphone. She wasn't filming for fame. She was filming for evidence. Don't kill it if it's down," she cried out, her old morality clashing with the new reality. "He's defenseless." Izuku paused. His hand hovered, glowing with destructive power. He looked at the Nomu. It was gargling blood, unable to move. First user, she's right, Izuku. If you execute it, you cross a line. Second user, if you let it live, it breaks out and kills 10 people tomorrow. Izuku struggled. The rain washed over him, mixing with the Nomu's black blood on his suit. He looked at the nurse. She was terrified of him. Not of the monster, but of him. He slowly lowered his hand. The lightning faded. He shot a thick binding of black whip, wrapping the Nomu from head to toe in a cocoon of dark energy, tighter than steel. He gagged its mouth and covered its eyes. It's secured, Izuku said, his voice carrying over the rain. Call the police. Tell them to bring a cryostasis unit. It won't hold forever. He stepped off the beast. He staggered slightly, the adrenaline of FA gene wearing off, leaving his muscles screaming in agony. He turned to the hospital. Dozens of faces were pressed against the glass. The nurse lowered her phone, her hands shaking. Who are you? She whispered. Izuku looked at her. He looked at the ruin of the hospital, the fire, the blood, and the darkness surrounding them. I'm just the cleanup crew, he muttered. He crouched and launched himself into the sky, leaving a shockwave that rattled the remaining windows. Part 6. The Guardian. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. The internet, or what was left of it, had ignited. The footage the nurse captured was grainy and shaking, but the image was clear. A small, tattered figure standing atop a defeated monster. The glowing eyes. The sheer, overwhelming power. The mercy shown at the last second. The media outlets that were still broadcasting latched onto it with desperation. They needed a narrative. They needed something other than Japan is falling. In a newsroom in central Tokyo, a haggard anchorwoman sat before a camera. We have received confirmation, she spoke, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. The entity operating in the dark zones has saved the Jaka Annex. 300 patients are alive this morning because of his intervention. The screen behind her showed a freeze frame of Izuku's face. The metal mask, the glowing eyes, the wild green hair. He is not a licensed pro-hero, the anchor continued. The HPSC has issued a warrant for his arrest for vigilantism and excessive use of force. She paused, looking directly into the camera. She went off script. But let's be honest. The police aren't coming. The heroes are stretched thin. This boy, this thing, is the only reason the dark zones haven't been wiped off the map. She tapped the paper on her desk. Social media is calling him the Green Ghost. But looking at this footage, looking at how he stands guard over the fallen, I think there is a better name. The image on the screen zoomed in on Izuku's solitary figure against the rain. He is the Guardian. Part 7. The Toll. Far away from the news broadcasts, in the hollow shell of a condemned apartment building, the Guardian was collapsing. Izuku fell onto a dirty mattress he had dragged into a corner. He didn't take off his suit. He didn't take off his boots. He only removed his mask, gasping for air. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. He coughed, and there was blood in his saliva. Internal bleeding, he diagnosed clinically. Probably from the Nomu's energy blast. Or just stress. He curled into a ball, shivering. The cold of the rain had seeped into his bones. I saved them, he whispered to the empty room. I saved them. Nana Shimura, you did, sweetie. You did good. Why doesn't it feel good? Izuku asked, a tear leaking from his eye. Why does it just feel heavy? First user. Because you are carrying the weight of a nation, Izuku. And it is crushing you. Izuku reached into his pouch and pulled out the crumpled photo of Class 1A again. It was wet now, the edges fraying. He looked at Ochako's smile. He looked at Ida's glasses. I want to go home, the boy sobbed, his voice breaking. I want to go back to the dorms. I want to eat Sato's cake. I want to study for a math test. He clutched the photo to his chest. But I can't. He squeezed his eyes shut. Danger sense was quiet for the moment. The immediate vicinity was clear. Just 5 minutes, he begged. Let me sleep for 5 minutes. His body shut down. He didn't drift off. He simply ceased to be awake. It was a black, dreamless void. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but on the streets below, something had changed. People were stepping out of their homes. They were looking up at the rooftops. They weren't just looking with fear anymore. They were looking with expectation. They knew he was out there. The sleepless demon. The brutal savior. The guardian of Japan. And as the sun struggled to rise behind the gray clouds, a new graffiti tag appeared on the wall of the saved hospital, painted in bright green spray paint by a grateful survivor. The guardian watches. To save the world, you must first survive it. The fortress of Yue High School stood as a monolith of steel and sensors against the gray horizon. Once a place of learning, it was now a bastion, a specialized evacuation shelter for civilians and the remaining heroes. The massive barriers, the Yue barrier, hummed with energy, keeping the chaos of the outside world at bay. But the barriers could not block out the truth. Inside the Class 1A dormitory, the air was thick, suffocatingly warm, and silent. The common room, usually a place of laughter and study sessions, had transformed into a war room. Maps covered the walls. News feeds played on mute on 3 different screens. 19 students sat or stood in various states of distress. On the main screen, the footage from the Jocko Hospital Annex played on a loop. It was the viral video captured by the nurse. It showed the entity, the guardian, ripping the arm off a high-end Noma. It showed the black mud, the glowing green eyes, the feral posture. That's not him, Toru Hagakure whispered, her gloves pressing against where her mouth would be. That can't be Midoriya. It is, Shoto Todoroki said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but his mismatched eyes were glued to the screen. Look at the boots. The iron soles? Look at the way he moves. That's shoot style. It's not shoot style anymore, Mashireo Ojiro muttered, rubbing his tail anxiously. It's just violence. There's no form. He's just breaking things. Katsuki Bakugo sat on the edge of the sofa, his elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He hadn't said a word in 20 minutes. His eyes were narrowed, burning with a mixture of rage and something that looked terrifyingly like fear. He looked so thin, Ochako Uraraka said softly. She was standing by the window, looking out at the barrier walls. Her reflection in the glass looked ghostly. The suit hangs off him. He looks like he's starving. He's eating, Tenya Ida said, adjusting his glasses. His hand trembled slightly. He took supplies from the armory before he left. Nutrient bars. Supplements. Supplements? Uraraka spun around, her eyes wet. He's fighting wars every single night, Ida. He can't survive on protein bars and adrenaline. Look at him. He's dying out there. We know! Kirishima slammed his fist onto the table, cracking the wood. We know, all right? But what do we do? All Might says we can't leave. He says if we go to him, AFO will target us to get to him. He says we're liabilities. Since when do we listen to orders that get our friends killed? The voice was low, guttural. Everyone turned to Bakugo. He stood up slowly. The air around him seemed to heat up. That nerd. Bakugo pointed a shaking finger at the screen, at the frozen image of Izuku standing over the defeated Noma. He thinks he's a god. He thinks because he has All Might's power, he doesn't need to eat, sleep, or breathe. He thinks he's sacrificing himself for us. Bakugo walked to the screen and stared into the glowing green eyes of the image. But he's wrong. He's not a symbol. He's a corpse walking. And if we don't drag his ass back here, or at least force him to stop moving for 5 minutes, there won't be a Deku left to save. The teachers won't let us leave, Tsuyu Ajiri croaked. The security measures are set to maximum. We're locked in. Then we break out, Shoto said, standing up to join Bakugo. We've done it before. This isn't Kamino, Momo Yayorozu interjected. She looked tired, bags under her eyes. She was the one coordinating the logistics for the civilian refugees in the school gym. The country is in anarchy. If we leave, we aren't just breaking rules. We're abandoning the people here who need protection. We're the last line of defense for the shelter. The room fell silent again. The weight of the dilemma crushed them. Stay and protect the innocent, leaving Izuku to rot in the darkness? Or go to Izuku and risk the safety of the shelter and themselves? We don't need everyone, Bakugo growled. Just the heavy hitters. The ones who can keep up with him. He moves faster than sound now, Bakugo, Tokoemi noted grimly, dark shadow nodding on his shoulder. Even you might not catch him. I'll catch him, Bakugo snarled. I'll catch him, and I'll blow his legs off if that's what it takes to make him sit down. Uraraka looked back at the window. The rain outside was relentless. We have to try, she whispered. Because looking at that video, he's not fighting the villains anymore. He's fighting himself. And he's losing. Part 2, The Politics of Dust. While Yui debated strategy, the remnants of the Japanese government were trying to maintain the illusion of control. In a reinforced bunker beneath the National Diet Building, a council of emergency officials and the remaining executives of the Hero Public Safety Commission, HPSC, were gathered. The room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. The public approval ratings for the Hero system are in the single digits, an analyst said, sliding a tablet across the table. Trust in Endeavor is shaky. Trust in the police is non-existent. The only metric that is rising is the Guardian. The acting president of the HPSC, a stern woman with graying hair named Yakumaru, slammed her hand on the table. He is a vigilante, she snapped. He is an unlicensed miner using a quirk to inflict grievous bodily harm. He decapitated a villain in Shinjuku yesterday. Do you understand the legal precedent that sets? If we allow this, we are condoning anarchy. With all due respect, Madam President, a police liaison officer said, rubbing his temples. The villain in Shinjuku was a bioengineered weapon that was about to release a nerve toxin into a subway station. The Guardian didn't decapitate him. He destroyed the weapon's emission glands. The villain lived. It doesn't matter. Yakumaru stood up. We need order. We need the people to trust the institutions, not a feral child running on rooftops. If the world thinks they don't need laws, then we have already lost to all for one. So, what is your proposal? The analyst asked. Issue a warrant, Yakumaru commanded. Designate Izuku Midoriya as a villain class threat. Order his immediate capture. We need to show that no one is above the law. The room went deadly silent. Madam, the police liaison said slowly. If we do that, the public will eat us alive. Do it. 2 hours later, the announcement was made over the emergency broadcast frequencies. Attention citizens. The individual known as Deku or the Guardian is hereby designated a Class B villain for acts of vigilantism, destruction of property, and brutalization of suspects. Citizens are ordered to report his location to the nearest police precinct. The reaction was immediate. In the tent cities that had sprung up in the safe zones, people gathered around radios. A villain? A man shouted, throwing his ration can at the speaker. He saved my daughter when the heroes were running away. He's the only one out there. A woman screamed. He hasn't slept in weeks. And you want to arrest him? In a shelter in Saitama, a group of civilians approached the police barricade. They weren't armed with weapons but with science. The Guardian protects us. Who protects him? The police officers behind the barricade looked at each other. Many of them had been saved by the Green Ghost in the last month. Many of them had seen the green lightning streak past and felt relief, not fear. I'm not arresting him, a young officer muttered, lowering his riot shield. If I see him, I'm saluting him. Quiet, his sergeant hissed, but he didn't raise his voice. He looked at the broadcast tower. The suits in Tokyo don't get it. The law didn't save us. He did. The warrant, intended to re-establish order, did the opposite. It cemented Izuku Midoriya's status. He wasn't just a hero anymore. He was a martyr. He was the saint of the abandoned. Part 3, The Grinding of Gears. Izuku didn't hear the broadcast. He had smashed the public address speakers in his sector days ago because the noise interfered with danger sense. He was currently in the Chiba industrial zone. The rain had finally stopped, replaced by a thick, cloying fog that smelled of rust and wet ash. Move. Just move. His body was a symphony of pain. His right arm was in a makeshift splint he had fashioned from scrap metal and black whip. He had fractured the ulna punching through a bank vault door to stop a robbery 3 hours ago. He hadn't set the bone properly. There wasn't time. He landed heavily on a warehouse roof, stumbling. His foot caught on a vent, and he fell face first into a puddle of stagnant water. He didn't get up immediately. The cold water soaked into his mask. It felt good. It numbed the burning in his face. First user, Izuku, stay down. Just for a minute. Fifth user, Banjo Kid, your heart rate is erratic. Your arrhythmia ing all over the place. I'm fine, Izuku mumbled into the puddle. Bubbles rose. He pushed himself up. His arms shook so violently that his elbows knocked together. Danger sense pulsed. A low throb. Not a villain. Just malice. General malice. The world was angry. He stood up, swaying like a drunkard. His vision swam. For a moment, the warehouse roof wasn't a roof. It was the UA classroom. He saw Aizawa at the chalkboard. He saw Bakugo yelling at him. Kaken? Izuku reached out. The vision dissolved into gray mist. Hallucinations, he diagnosed. Hypoglycemia. Need sugar. He reached for his belt pouch. It was empty. He had eaten the last bar yesterday. Or was it the day before? It's okay, he whispered. I can photosynthesize energy. Wait. No. That's a plant quirk. I don't have a plant quirk, he giggled. It was a dry, broken sound that turned into a coughing fit. Blood spattered the inside of his mask. Third user, this is critical failure. Ninth. You need to find a safe house. Now. Can't, Izuku said, stumbling forward. AFO is watching. If I stop, he wins. Danger sense spiked sharply. Behind him. Izuku spun around, Black Whip lashing out instinctively. 3 figures emerged from the fog. Not Nomu. Just villains. Escapees from a low-security prison. They looked ragged, desperate. One had a knife quirk, his fingers turning into blades. Another was huge, with skin like tree bark. Look at this, the knife villain sneered. It's the big bad guardian. He looks like he's about to keel over. There's a bounty on his head now, the bark villain grunted. The government wants him. The boss wants him. Either way, we get paid. Izuku stared at them. His HUD, heads-up display, inside his cowl flickered and died. The battery was dead. He was fighting blind. Go away, Izuku rasped. Get him, the villains charged. In his prime, or even 2 months ago, Izuku would have ended this in a microsecond. But now, he tried to engage one for all at 30%. His pathways stuttered. The energy didn't flow, it spiked. He dodged the knife villain's lunge, but his feet were heavy. The blade grazed his ribs, cutting through the suit and skin. Pain. Sharp and hot. Izuku grunted, stepping back. The bark villain swung a massive fist. Izuku blocked it, but he had no leverage. The impact sent him flying backward. He crashed into a ventilation unit, denting the metal. He's weak. The knife villain laughed. The rumors were lies. He's just a tired little kid. Izuku lay in the debris. He tried to summon Black Whip. A thin, wispy tendril emerged, then fizzled out like a wet fuse. No. Izuku wheezed. Not yet. The villains closed in. Let's cut his legs off first, the knife villain suggested. Make sure he doesn't run. Izuku forced his eyes open. The green glow was dim, flickering like a dying candle. He tried to stand, but his legs refused to obey. The connection between his brain and his muscles was fraying. Is this it? He thought. Is this how the symbol of peace dies? In a puddle in Shiba, killed by thugs? No. He gritted his teeth. He bit his tongue hard enough to draw blood. The sharp pain clarified his mind for 1 second. Gear shift. He forced the second user's quirk to activate. He didn't target himself. He targeted the air pressure around him. Transmission. With a scream of pure exertion, Izuku punched the empty air. The shockwave, delayed and accelerated, exploded outward. It wasn't a controlled attack. It was a bomb. The blast radius shattered the ventilation unit, stripped the roof of its gravel, and sent the 3 villains tumbling away like ragdolls into the fog. But the recoil destroyed what was left of Izuku's stamina. He collapsed face first onto the concrete. Silence returned to the roof. Izuku lay there. He couldn't move his fingers. He couldn't feel his legs. He could only hear the wheezing of his own breath and the distant drip 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 of condensation. Get up, the vestiges screamed. I can't, Izuku thought. I'm sorry, All Might. I can't. The darkness began to creep in at the edges of his vision. It was warm. It was inviting. Then, he heard footsteps. Not the frantic scuffle of the villains. These were heavy, deliberate steps. Boots on gravel. Clack. 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 Izuku tried to lift his head. He managed to lift it an inch. Through the fog, a silhouette approached. It was draped in tattered red cloth. It carried a jagged blade on its back. Stain, the hero killer. Izuku's mind screamed danger, but his body gave up. His head dropped back to the concrete. Is this the end of your path? A voice asked. It was rough, like sandpaper on stone. Izuku couldn't answer. The footsteps stopped right beside his head. I have watched you, Stain said. For weeks. I have watched you purge the filth from this city. I have watched you break your body to save the unworthy. Stain knelt down. Izuku flinched, expecting a blade to the throat. Instead, a hand, rough, scarred, wrapped in bandages, touched his shoulder. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't an attack. It was an inspection. You possess the conviction, Stain murmured. You are the only one who does. The fakes hide in their fortress. The pretenders retire. You remain. Stain stood up. He looked at the unconscious bodies of the 3 villains Izuku had blasted away. But a sword that is chipped cannot cut, Stain said. And you are shattered, boy. Izuku's consciousness was fading fast. The last thing he saw was Stain drawing his katana. He's going to kill me, Izuku thought. At least I kept them safe. He didn't feel the blade. He felt himself being lifted. It was awkward and rough. Stain threw Izuku over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. The smell of dried blood and old iron filled Izuku's nose. Sleep, Stain commanded. The filth will not touch you tonight. Izuku Midoriya, the guardian of Japan, finally closed his eyes. Part 4, The Meaning of Silence. The world went black. But it wasn't empty. In the void, Izuku floated. The vestiges were there, but they were silent. They stood in a circle around him, watching. Why aren't you yelling at me? Izuku asked them. Because there is nothing left to say, the first user replied gently. You have run until your feet bled. You have given everything. Did I win? Izuku asked. You survived, Nana Shimura said, brushing a ghostly hand over his forehead. Sometimes, that is the only victory that matters. Part 5, The Awakening. Izuku woke up to the smell of burning wood. Panic seized him instantly. Fire. Danger. He tried to bolt upright, but a sharp pain in his ribs slammed him back down. He groaned, clutching his side. Do not move. You ripped your stitches. Izuku froze. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. He was in a small room. It looked like an abandoned maintenance shed on top of a building. The windows were boarded up. A small fire crackled in a metal drum in the center of the room, providing heat and light. Izuku looked down at himself. His gamma suit, or what was left of it, had been stripped to the waist. His chest was wrapped in bandages. His broken arm was set properly and splinted with wood and cloth. He looked across the fire. Sitting on a crate, sharpening a jagged katana with a whetstone, was the hero killer, Stain. Izuku scrambled backward, his back hitting the wall. Green lightning flickered weakly around his skin. Stain, Izuku hissed. Stain didn't look up. Shink. 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 The sound of the stone against the blade was rhythmic, hypnotic. You are awake, Stain said. Good. Your metabolism is unnatural. A normal man would be in a coma for a week after the trauma you sustained. Why? Izuku coughed, his throat dry. Why didn't you kill me? Stain paused. He held the blade up to the firelight, inspecting the edge. Because you are not a fake, Stain said simply. He sheathed the sword and stood up. He walked over to the fire and picked up a tin can that was heating on the grate. He walked toward Izuku. Izuku tensed, preparing to fight, but he had nothing. His reserves were empty. Stain stopped and held out the can. It contained soup. It smelled like canned broth and scavenged vegetables. Eat, Stain ordered. Izuku stared at the can, then at Stain's face. The nose that had been cut off, the manic eyes. Why? Izuku asked again. Because if you die, Stain said, his voice dropping to a growl, the false society wins. If you die, the chaotic darkness wins. You are the only thing holding the line between order and oblivion. Stain shoved the can into Izuku's hand. I do not serve you, Stain clarified, turning his back and walking to the window. He peered out through a crack in the boards. I serve the ideology. And right now, you are the physical embodiment of that ideology. Self-sacrifice. Duty. Power without desire for reward. Izuku looked at the soup. His stomach roared. He hadn't realized how hungry he was. He lifted the can to his lips and drank greedily. The warmth spread through his chest, revitalizing him more than he expected. Where are we? Izuku asked after finishing. Kamino Ward, Stain replied. Near the statue of All Might. It seemed fitting. Izuku flinched. I have to go. I have to patrol. You will not, Stain said. You cannot stand. I have to. Izuku tried to push himself up, but his legs gave way. He fell to his knees. People are dying while I sit here. People die every day. Stain shouted, spinning around. His killing intent flooded the room, paralyzing Izuku. They die because they are weak. They die because the society that raised them made them soft. Stain walked over and towered over the kneeling boy. You think you can save everyone? That is arrogance. That is the same arrogance that brought All Might down. It's not arrogance. Izuku yelled back, tears streaming down his face. It's responsibility. I have the power. If I don't use it, their blood is on my hands. And if you break? Stain asked quietly. If you snap in half like a dry twig? Who saves them then? Izuku went silent. He looked at his scarred hands. I don't know, Izuku whispered. I don't know what else to do. I'm scared, Stain. I'm so scared. The confession hung in the air. Stain's expression softened, just a fraction. He looked at the boy, not as a symbol, but as a child who had been forced to carry the world. Fear is good, Stain said. Fear keeps the blade sharp. He turned back to the window. Rest tonight, Guardian. I will take the watch. Izuku blinked. You'll kill them. I will cull the wicked, Stain corrected. And I will spare the innocent. That is the compromise. I can't let you kill, Izuku said, trying to summon his authority. You are in no position to stop me, Stain said. He opened the door. The wind howled outside. Sleep. Tomorrow, the wolves will come for you. And you must be ready to hunt. Stain stepped out into the night, vanishing into the shadows. Izuku sat alone in the shed. The fire crackled. He was safe. For the first time in 2 months, he was truly safe. He pulled his knees to his chest and wept. He cried for the pain, for the exhaustion, and for the twisted irony that the only person who understood his burden was a monster. Outside, in the ruins of Kamino, the hero killer moved across the rooftops. He moved not to terrorize, but to protect the perimeter of the shed. For one night, the guardian and the killer were on the same side. And in the distance, unnoticed by both, a drone hovered silently in the sky, transmitting a signal back to a hidden laboratory. All for one smiled in the dark. The pawn has stopped moving, the demon lord whispered. Now, we begin the endgame. To carry the world, one must first decide if the world is worth carrying. The fire in the oil drum had burned down to embers, casting a dull, dying red glow against the corrugated metal walls of the rooftop shed. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the thunder. It was the silence of a held breath. Izuku Midoriya sat on the floor, his legs pulled up to his chest. For the first time in weeks, his mind was clear. The constant, screaming buzz of danger sense was a low hum, muffled by the distance and the temporary lull in the chaos. Across from him, sitting on a rusted crate with the posture of a gargoyle, was Kaizomi Akaguro, Stain, the hero killer. He wasn't looking at Izuku. He was tending to his equipment. With methodical, almost religious devotion, he was wiping down a serrated dagger with a rag soaked in oil. The smell of metal and old blood permeated the small space. You are staring, Stain said. His voice was gravel grinding on glass, rough and uncomfortable to hear. I'm thinking, Izuku replied. His voice was stronger than it had been the night before, though it still carried the rasp of overuse. Thinking is dangerous for a man of action, Stain muttered, sliding the dagger into a sheath strapped to his boot. Thought leads to hesitation. Hesitation leads to death. Hesitation is what keeps me from becoming a monster, Izuku countered. Stain stopped. He slowly raised his head, his eyes, rimmed with red and madness, locking onto Izuku's green ones. Is it? Stain asked. He stood up, his movements fluid and predatory. He paced the small room, his heavy boots making no sound on the floor. You hesitated with the Nomi yesterday. You hesitated with the villains in Chiba. And because you hesitated, because you spared them, resources will be wasted keeping them alive. Guards will be risked watching them, and eventually, they will escape again. Stain stopped in front of Izuku, casting a long shadow over the boy. Mercy is a luxury of the peaceful, Stain hissed. This world is no longer peaceful. It is a battlefield. And on a battlefield, mercy is just weakness in a pretty mask. Izuku looked up. He didn't flinch. He had looked into the eyes of All for One. The hero killer's intensity, while terrifying, was familiar ground. I didn't spare them because I'm weak, Izuku said quietly. I spared them because if I start deciding who deserves to live and who deserves to die, I stop being a guardian. I become a tyrant. A tyrant brings order. Stain slammed his fist against the metal wall. The sound rang out like a gunshot. Look at this country. It is rotting. The false heroes have fled. The police cower in their stations. The only law left is power. You have that power. You are the only one worthy of wielding it because you do not seek it for fame or money. Stain crouched down, bringing his face inches from Izuku's. I saved you because you are the true hero, Stain whispered, his breath hot. But you are shackled by the morals of a dead society. You are trying to clean a sewer with a toothbrush. You need to flush it out. You need to kill the infection. Izuku shook his head slowly. If I kill, then All Might's legacy dies with me. He didn't just save people's bodies. He saved their hearts. He made them believe that tomorrow could be better, and look where that belief got us. Stain spat, standing up and gesturing to the ruined city outside the boarded window. Shigaraki was born from that society. The League was born from the cracks your symbol of peace ignored. By refusing to cull the weeds, you allowed the garden to be choked. It wasn't the mercy that caused this, Izuku said, his voice rising. He winced as his ribs protested, but he pushed through the pain. It was the indifference. People assumed All Might would handle everything, so they stopped looking out for each other. They stopped being heroes in their own lives. Izuku slowly got to his feet. He swayed slightly, but locked his knees. He grabbed his tattered yellow cape, Gran Torino's cape, and fastened it around his neck. I won't kill, Izuku stated firmly. I will break every bone in my body to stop them. I will run until my heart explodes. But I will not become an executioner. Because the moment I do, I prove Shigaraki right. I prove that violence is the only language that matters. Stain stared at him. The madness in his eyes swirled with something else. Respect? Disappointment? It was hard to tell. You are a fool, Stain said finally, turning away. A glorious, radiant fool. You will burn yourself to ash trying to warm a world that is made of ice. Maybe, Izuku said, adjusting his gauntlets. But it's my fire to burn. Stain picked up his katana and strapped it to his back. The wolves are gathering, Stain murmured. My patrol is finished. I leave the sheep to you, shepherd. Stain walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the latch. Do not expect me to save you again, he said without looking back. Next time you fall, I will take it as proof that your ideology was too heavy to carry. I won't fall, Izuku said. Stain opened the door and vanished into the pre-dawn gray. Izuku was alone again. He took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet concrete and ozone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, high-density energy concentrate he had found in the shed, likely left by Stain. He swallowed it dry. Fourth user, Haikyuu Shinomori 9th. Are you ready? No, Izuku whispered. Second user, Kudo good. Only idiots are ready for war. The smart ones are terrified. Izuku stepped out of the shed. The wind whipped his hair. He looked out over the skyline of Kamino. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then, the world screamed. Part 2, the trifecta. It started with a sound that wasn't a sound. It was a pressure wave. Danger sense exploded in Izuku's skull. It wasn't the directional spike he was used to. It was an omnidirectional assault, a white-hot migraine that dropped him to one knee instantly. Fourth user, multiple contacts. Malice level, catastrophic. Where? Izuku gasped, clutching his head. Fourth user, everywhere. It's coordinated. Izuku's HUD, which had recharged slightly from a solar strip on his suit, flickered to life. He tapped into the emergency broadcast frequency. Mayday! Mayday! This is Osaka Precinct 4. The bridge is down. I repeat, the Great Bridge is down. We have massive casualties. This is Nagoya Fire Department. The refinery. The fire is alive. We can't contain it. It's spreading to the residential district. Sendai report. The dam has been breached. The water level is rising. We need immediate evacuation. Izuku stared at the horizon. Osaka. Nagoya. Sendai. 3 major cities. Hundreds of miles apart. Attacked at the exact same second. First user, it's all for one. He knows, Izuku said, his voice trembling. He knows I rested. He knows I'm recovering. He's trying to stretch me. Fifth user, Banjo, you can't be in 3 places at once, kid. You have to choose. Which one is closest? Nagoya, Izuku said. It's on the way to Osaka. Sixth user, and Sendai is in the opposite direction. If you go south to Nagoya and Osaka, Sendai dies. Izuku stood up. The wind roared around him. The choice was impossible. It was the trolley problem on a national scale. Save the burning city and the collapsing city, and let the drowning city perish? Or split the difference and fail at all 3? I don't choose, Izuku snarled. Green lightning erupted from his skin. It wasn't the flickering sparks of 45%. It was a torrential storm of energy that cracked the concrete beneath his feet. The air around him ionized, smelling of ozone and burning hair. I save everyone. Second user, you can't. The distance is too great. Even with FA gene, you are subsonic at 45%. Then I go beyond, Izuku said. He crouched low, his muscles screaming in protest. One for all. 60%. Constant. First user, Izuku, no! Your bones haven't healed. You'll tear your ligaments. If I don't, Izuku shouted over the roar of power, they die. I won't let them die. He focused. He visualized the egg in the microwave. He visualized the lock. He visualized the faces of Class 1A. He pushed. The limiter in his brain screamed stop, but he shoved it aside. The power flooded him. It felt like magma in his veins. His skin felt like it was splitting. Third user, FA gene charging kinetic energy. Second user, gearshift low gear. Second gear. Top gear. Smash! Izuku launched himself. He didn't just jump. He vanished. The sonic boom shattered every window in a 3-block radius of the safe house. A crater 10 feet deep was left where he had stood. He was a green comet, tearing through the atmosphere, leaving a trail of shockwaves in his wake. Part 3, The Inferno of Nagoya. The flight to Nagoya usually took the Shinkansen 40 minutes. Izuku made it in 8. He was moving so fast that his vision tunneled. The landscape below was a blur of gray and green. The wind resistance was a physical wall he had to constantly punch through. His mask was vibrating against his face. Arrival. Nagoya was burning. It wasn't a normal fire. The flames were blue and purple, dancing with a malevolent intelligence. A villain with a plasma generation quirk had ignited the industrial district's chemical storage. The heat hit Izuku before he even landed. It seared his eyes. "Help us!" screamed a firefighter, spraying water that evaporated instantly upon touching the blue flames. A massive storage tank, filled with volatile chemicals, was groaning. The metal was glowing red. If it breached, the explosion would level the surrounding residential blocks. Izuku dropped from the sky like a meteor. Black whip! Hundreds of black tendrils shot out from his back, anchoring onto the surrounding buildings, office blocks, warehouses, anything sturdy. Brace! Izuku roared. He landed in front of the glowing tank. He didn't punch it. He wrapped Black Whip around the entire structure, reinforcing the melting steel with pure energy. The heat was unbearable. His suit began to singe. The soles of his boots smoked. Identify source, Izuku commanded himself. Danger sense pointed to the center of the inferno. A man in a fireproof suit, laughing maniacally, throwing balls of plasma. Burn! Burn it all for the master. Izuku couldn't let go of the tank. If he did, it would explode. But if he didn't stop the villain, the fire would consume the city. Third user, use the air pressure. Izuku gritted his teeth. He held the tank with his left arm, the muscles bulging and tearing under the strain of 60%. He pulled back his right arm. One for all 100%. Wyoming smash. He didn't aim at the villain. He aimed at the ground in front of the villain. He punched. The air pressure created a localized vacuum. The shockwave blasted the oxygen away from the fire. For a split second, the inferno was starved. The flames flickered and died out in a massive radius. The villain was blown backward by the concussion, slamming into a concrete wall and falling unconscious. The tank groaned, cooling rapidly as the heat source vanished. Izuku held it for another 10 seconds, ensuring the structural integrity held. He dropped to his knees, gasping. His right arm was purple, bruised from the recoil. His lungs burned from smoke inhalation. He stopped it, a firefighter whispered, staring through the steam. Izuku didn't wait for thanks. Osaka. The bridge. He forced himself up. His legs felt like lead. Next, he choked out. F.A. Jean, release. He launched himself west. Part 4. The Collapse of Osaka. The Great Bridge of Osaka connected the mainland to the artificial islands. It was currently snapped in half. A villain with a vibration quirk had destabilized the harmonics of the support pylons. The middle section of the bridge was tilting dangerously, threatening to dump dozens of cars, and a school bus, into the churning sea below. Izuku arrived as the cables were snapping. Snap. 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 Like gunshots. The screams of the children in the bus were audible over the wind. The bus was sliding. It reached the edge of the asphalt. It tipped. No! Izuku dived. He caught the rear bumper of the bus with Black Whip. The weight yanked him downward. He slammed into the side of the bridge pylon, digging his fingers into the concrete to anchor himself. The bus dangled over the ocean. Inside, 20 children were screaming, piling against the front windshield. It's okay! Izuku yelled, his voice strained. I've got you! But he didn't just have the bus. Above him, the rest of the bridge section groaned. The vibrations were still tearing it apart. A massive slab of concrete, weighing at least 10 tons, broke loose directly above the bus. If it fell, it would crush the bus and sever Izuku's line. Izuku looked up. He had one hand holding the bus, via Black Whip, and one hand anchoring himself to the pylon. He had no hands left. First user, use your legs! Izuku swung his body outward, hanging perpendicular to the pylon. He coiled his legs, shoot style, smasher. As the 10-ton slab fell, Izuku kicked upward. His iron soles met the concrete. Crack. The impact sent a jolt of agony up his spine that nearly made him black out. His shin bones felt like they were bending, but the slab shattered. It exploded into dust and smaller rocks that rained harmlessly into the water. Hold on! Izuku roared. He pulled. He pulled with every fiber of his being. He hauled the bus up, hand over hand, defying physics with sheer hysterical strength. He swung the bus onto the stable section of the bridge. It landed with a heavy thud. The children were safe. Izuku let go of the pylon and fell onto the asphalt next to the bus. He couldn't feel his legs. The kick had done something bad to his knees. Danger Sense was screaming again. Sendai. The water. I can't. Izuku whispered, staring at the gray sky. I can't move. Nana Shimura, you have to, Izuku. They are drowning. Izuku rolled onto his stomach. He crawled. He forced his body to stand. He was weeping now. Not from sadness, but from pure, unadulterated pain. Why? He sobbed. Why is he doing this? Because he wants to break you, the second user said coldly. And it's working. No, Izuku said. He slapped his own face. Hard. No. He channeled the energy. It was sluggish now. 45% was the limit. He took off again. North. Towards Sendai. Part 5. The Flood of Sendai. By the time he reached Sendai, the damage was done. The dam hadn't just breached, it had collapsed. A wall of water had swept through the lower districts. The streets were rivers. Houses were floating. But the villain was still there. Standing atop a floating piece of debris was a massive figure. It wasn't a random villain. It was a Tartarus escapee known as King Orca, no relation to Gang Orca, but a mutant of similar terrifying power. He was controlling the currents, creating whirlpools to suck survivors under. Drown! Orca bellowed. Wash away the filth! Izuku hit the water like a skipstone. He didn't have the height for a smash. He skimmed the surface, using Black Whip to pull people out of the whirlpools and toss them onto rooftops. 1, 2, 10, 50. He was moving on instinct. Grab. Toss. Grab. Toss. You! King Orca saw him. The gnat! Orca summoned a massive tendril of water and slammed it down on Izuku. Izuku tried to dodge, but his exhausted body lagged. The water hit him with the force of a freight train. He was smashed underwater. It was dark. Cold. Izuku inhaled water. He choked. This is it, a voice in his head said. Just let go. It's quiet here. He sank deeper. His vision began to fade. Then, he saw something. Below him, trapped in a submerged car, a little girl was banging on the window. Her eyes were wide with terror. Izuku's eyes snapped open. The green glow returned, dimmer but fiercer. Not yet. He burst from the water, shattering the surface tension. He ripped the car door off its hinges and grabbed the girl. He shot upward, depositing her on a high balcony. He turned to King Orca. Izuku didn't have the energy for a fancy move. He didn't have the energy for strategy. He simply screamed. It was a primal, animalistic sound. He charged straight through the water blasts. The pressure stripped the skin from his arms. He didn't care. He reached Orca. One for all. He grabbed Orca's dorsal fin. 100%. He didn't punch. He threw. He used Orca's own mass against him. He spun and hurled the massive villain out of the flooded city, sending him crashing into the mountainside a mile away. The water currents calmed instantly as the quirk control vanished. Izuku hovered in the air for a second, suspended by float. He looked down at the devastation. Thousands of homes destroyed. But on the rooftops, thousands of people were alive. He had done it. Osaka. Nagoya. Sendai. He had saved them all. Battery 0%. Izuku fell. He didn't try to catch himself. He hit a rooftop garden, rolling into the mud. He lay there, staring up at the rain that had started to fall again. He couldn't move a single muscle. His fingers were locked in a claw shape. His legs were numb. His chest heaved with shallow, rattling breaths. Beep. His communications device. The one he thought was broken, it flickered to life. A holographic projection beam shot out, forming a small image in the air above him. It wasn't a hero. It was a man in a crisp suit, wearing a helmet that covered his destroyed face. All for one. Impressive, the voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly mocking. Truly impressive, Midoriya Izuku. Izuku tried to speak, but only a wheeze came out. 3 cities. 3 catastrophic events. And you saved them all, AFO clapped slowly. You really are All Might's successor. You have his stubbornness. And his stupidity. Fuck you. Izuku whispered. Language, AFO chided. I just wanted to congratulate you. You won the battle today. But look at you. The projection zoomed in, showing Izuku his own reflection. He looked like a corpse. His eyes were sunken pits. His skin was gray. Blood leaked from his nose and ears. You are broken, AFO said softly. And I didn't even have to throw a punch. I just gave you a choice, and you chose to destroy yourself. Izuku tried to reach for the device to crush it, but his arm wouldn't lift. This is the reality of the Guardian, AFO continued. You can be a god, Izuku. But gods don't have friends. Gods don't sleep. And gods, eventually go mad. The projection leaned in closer. Rest up, boy. Tomorrow, I'll burn 4 cities. Can you save 4? What about 5? How much of you is left to give? The hologram flickered and died. No. Izuku whimpered. Tears mixed with the rain on his face. No more. He tried to get up. I have to prepare. 4 cities. He managed to push his torso up, his arms trembling violently. I have to. His elbow gave out. He collapsed face first into the mud. Darkness took him. But this time, it wasn't the peaceful darkness of the safe house. It was a cold, jagged darkness filled with mocking laughter. He was alone. He was broken. And the war had only just begun. Part 6, The Shadow. High above, on a neighboring skyscraper, a figure watched the scene through binoculars. It wasn't Stain. Stain had stayed in Kamino. This figure lowered the binoculars. He's down, the figure said into a radio. Confirmed visual. Target is incapacitated in Sendai. Sector 4 rooftop. A voice crackled back. It was sharp, explosive. Is he breathing? Barely, the figure replied. He looks bad, Bakugo. Worse than we thought. Keep eyes on him, the voice, Katsuki Bakugo, ordered. Don't engage. If AFO sees you, he might send backup to finish the nerd off. Just watch him. We're inbound. ETA? 20 minutes. We're bringing the transport. Copy that. The figure, Hantashiro, taped the binoculars to his helmet and crouched in the shadows. Hang in there, Midoriya, Shiro whispered, looking at the small, broken green speck on the rooftop below. Cavalry's coming. And we're pissed.